Christmas dinner froze on her words. "You're dead to me," my mother said. Knives, forks, and my heartbeat stopped. I looked around the table. No one met my eyes. Silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. That night, I made a decision. I walked out and cut every tie. I'm Vada, 29, from Millfield, now writing my own life. I grew up performing for approval that never came. That night, I chose something radical. Peace over permission. Years later, I would set my table differently. Seats only for those who show up in love. If this hits home, tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe if family drama stories help you breathe. They buried me at Christmas. I came back alive without them. I grew up in Millfield, a small town where reputation mattered more than truth. My mother, Catherine, ruled our house like an image manager. Every outfit, every activity, every smile, curated for perfection. Behind closed doors, it felt like prison. Nothing I ever did was enough. Stand up straighter, Vada. Fix your hair, Vada. Why can't you be more like your sister, Amelia? My father, Thomas, stayed quiet. A sympathetic glance across the table. Then later, a pat on the shoulder. Your mother just wants what's best. What she wanted was flawless. And I was painfully human. Amelia, 3 years younger, was the golden child. Straight A's. Piano recitals. Perfect posture. Mom paraded her like a prize. "Look how nicely Amelia sits," she'd say. Her glance told me everything. You will never measure up. As a child, I tried. Ballet, though I hated it. Hours of penmanship drills. Frilly dresses that classmates mocked. Still, Mom's disappointed sigh filled the house. By 15, my rebellion flickered. I wanted the school newspaper. She demanded debate club. Journalism isn't a real career, Vada. Lawyers make something of themselves. When I dyed one streak of hair purple, she didn't speak to me for 3 days, then dragged me to her salon, made me pay to have it fixed. Dad stayed silent. Amelia thrived, and I became the problem child. That's the truth of growing up in a house where love is conditional. You don't stop wanting it. You just learn you'll never be enough to earn it. And that realization, born in Millfield, sharpened through years of rejection, was the seed of the decision I made that Christmas night. To walk away. College was oxygen. 3 hours away, but it felt like another planet. Weekend visits became monthly. Monthly became holidays only. Distance made me bold. I switched from pre-law to journalism without warning her. When she found out, her voice cracked through the dorm phone. "You're throwing away your potential. We're not paying for you to waste our money." My roommate watched me sob. But for once, I stood my ground. Dad slipped me quiet support. "Just do well, kiddo. That's all that matters." Graduation came with pride and fear. Against my gut, I moved back home to Millfield. The Gazette offered a starting job, and student loans needed paying. Back in that town, her grip returned like winter frost. Daily texts about law firms. Sunday dinners turned interrogation sessions. Lucas changed that. We met at the fall festival. He was behind the camera, capturing life, not staging it. Kind eyes. Steady presence. The first person who made me feel seen. I brought him home. Mom's glance slid over his tattoos like a crime scene. "He's not stable, Vada. You need someone who can provide." As if I weren't already providing for myself. Dad tried small talk. Amelia smiled politely. But Mom made sure her disapproval filled the room. Lucas held my hand under the table. A quiet rebellion, warm and defiant. As weeks passed, I clung tighter to him. Not out of need, but recognition. He saw the real me, not the failure version she invented. Thanksgiving passed in tense silence. Christmas loomed, a storm waiting to break. Mom called one evening, voice sugary and sharp. "So, will Lucas be joining us for Christmas dinner?" "Yes," I said, steady. "He doesn't have family nearby. I want him there." A pause long enough to sting. "Christmas dinner is for family. If you insist on bringing your photographer friend, make sure he looks appropriate." She said photographer the way someone says felon. It was a warning disguised as permission. I hung up and sat in the dark. Lucas found me there. "Do you want me to come?" he asked gently. I looked at him, fighting tears. "She's going to make it miserable." His answer was simple. "I'm not letting you face her alone. We're a team." That night, for the first time, I felt ready. Ready to stop bending. Ready to choose peace over performance. The stage was set for the Christmas dinner that would break everything. They thought I would sit quietly. They were wrong. Christmas Day. Snow dusted roofs like powdered sugar, hiding something bitter beneath. I stood in front of the mirror, sweater dress smoothed, hair pinned neat. Lucas buttoned his shirt, refusing to remove his earring. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, dread clawing my stomach. We carried gifts, the casserole, and a silent pact. Leave any time it became unbearable. The door opened to my mother's painted smile. "Merry Christmas, dear, and Lucas. How nice." Her eyes scanned us, cataloging flaws. Inside, the tree glowed perfect. Not a single homemade ornament. Just gold and burgundy, her curated kingdom. My father rose, warmth in his smile. "There's my girl." He hugged me tight, then shook Lucas's hand. "You're welcome here, son." Amelia sat beside Greg, her banker prince. She gave me a guilty smile. Silent apology across the room. We exchanged gifts. Mom admired her handbag with forced delight, checking the label. Dad loved his book. Amelia twirled the scarf. Lucas offered wine and chocolates. "Thank you," Mom said flatly. "Vada, casserole in the kitchen." Her voice already sharp. In the kitchen, she leaned close. "You've gained weight since Thanksgiving." Her fork scraped gravy hard. "Did you even follow my recipe?" I stacked rolls. "Yes, Mom." A lie. I'd cut the sugar. At the table, Lucas sat at the far end, half hidden by a poinsettia. Dad tried to help. "Vada's been writing great pieces at the Gazette." "That's wonderful," Mom replied coolly. "Though law would have been wiser." Lucas spoke up. "Her editor says she's being considered for feature writer. Readers love her work." Mom's smile tightened. "How nice, but the pay surely modest." Forks scraped. Conversation shifted to Amelia's promotion. I shrank, appetite gone. Then Dad asked, "Plans for the new year?" Lucas squeezed my hand. "We're considering Portland. Bigger opportunities for both of us." The table froze. "Portland," Mom repeated. "Across the country." "It's a chance, Mom," I said. "We're building our future." Her voice dropped to venom. "So you're following him." Reckless choices like always. "We're partners," I corrected. "We decide together." She scoffed. "Look at Amelia and Greg. Respectable. Why can't you choose wisely?" "Because those aren't my choices," I said firmly. "They're yours." Her jaw tightened. "If you go, don't expect anything from us. You'll be dead to me." Silence fell heavy. Dad stared at his plate. Amelia froze mid-breath. I placed my napkin down. "Then there's nothing left to say." Lucas stood with me. "Thank you for dinner," he said politely. We walked to the door. "Merry Christmas," I whispered, and left the house that would never be home. That night, tears blurred Christmas lights outside my window. I blocked their numbers. Every tie severed. She killed me at that table. But walking away gave me life. That night, the silence in my apartment was deafening. No phone buzzing. No texts demanding explanations. Just me, Lucas, and the ache of breaking away. I blocked their numbers. Removed them from social media. For the first time, I felt both free and orphaned. The days between Christmas and New Year blurred. Some mornings I woke lighter. Other mornings I woke crushed by grief. My body betrayed me. Jaw aching from grinding teeth. Shoulders locked tight from years of tension. Nights fractured by dreams of my mother chasing me. Scissors in hand, cutting pieces she didn't approve. Some nights I sat awake at 3 a.m. The apartment dark, except for streetlight shadows. I scrolled old photos, wondering if I had overreacted. Then I remembered her words. "You're dead to me." They cut deeper than silence ever could. Lucas held me through it all. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. "I'll support whatever you decide." "I've been dying by inches my whole life," I whispered. "It's time to finally breathe." Practical ties unraveled next. I left their family phone plan, bought my own insurance, changed locks so Mom's spare key no longer worked. Each step was brutal, but each cut was freedom. Then came Amelia's voicemail. Her voice sharp, loaded with guilt. "Dad was heartbroken when you didn't call on his birthday. Mom's barely eating. I'm cleaning up the mess of your tantrum. Call them and apologize." I deleted it. Blocked the number. At work, focus slipped. My editor noticed. "Everything okay, Vada? Your writing feels distracted." "Personal stuff," I said quietly. "I'll get back on track." He nodded, kind. Good writers need to process their own story, too. His compassion cracked something inside me. I wasn't used to kindness. Lucas urged therapy. Dr. Madison specialized in family trauma. Our first session left me raw. She said, "What you're describing is emotional control. Distance isn't selfish, it's survival." For once, someone named the wound clearly, and the naming itself felt like a bandage. Then the letter arrived. 4 pages of my mother's handwriting, lines swinging between guilt. After all we sacrificed. To threats about inheritance. Not a single apology, not once. I placed it in a folder labeled Family Communications. No reply. New Year's Eve, Lucas took me out. Over champagne, he whispered. To new beginnings. I smiled, fragile but real. The first month was excruciating. But every severed tie made space for peace. And in that space, my life began to regrow. She thought cutting me off would destroy me. It only planted the roots of my freedom. 6 months later, Portland looked nothing like Millfield. The air was lighter. My reflection in the mirror finally looked like me. Lucas's photography flourished. My writing sharpened with honesty I'd never dared before. For the first time, I wasn't editing myself for approval. New friends entered my orbit. Not people my mother curated. People who loved me as I was. They taught me something shocking. Love doesn't come with conditions. One evening, Lucas handed me a ring. Not flashy, but perfect. Yes, I said, tears falling. Not because of doubt, but because I realized my future wasn't chained to my past. A letter from Mom arrived weeks later. Pages of guilt, no apology. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Healing meant letting go of answers I'd never get. No sorry could rewrite childhood. No promise could erase Christmas night. But boundaries could. Boundaries turned grief into ground to stand on. Boundaries turned silence into peace. When I picture my wedding now, I walk the aisle alone. Not empty, but whole. I'm not the girl chasing crumbs of love. I'm the woman who sets her own table. Seats reserved only for those who show up in love. If you've ever cut ties, if you've ever chosen peace over permission, you know this freedom. It hurts, but it heals. They buried me with words. I came back alive with boundaries. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me your story in the comments. Before saying goodbye, if this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true family betrayal stories. That reminds us we are stronger than we think.
The phone rang just after 7:00 a.m., the kind of hour that usually means bad news or a mistake. I was pouring coffee into the same chipped mug I'd had since college when I heard it the landline, not my cell. I only kept it for storms and spam calls, and maybe because part of me still believed some news deserved to travel on wires, I let it ring once, twice. I should have let it go, but old habits don't retire easy. Emily, my mother, said Linda always formal even when she was hurting someone. Her voice was tight, composed, too composed. About Jessica's wedding. My sister, the younger one, the golden one. I know it's coming up, I said carefully, like I was trying not to wake something sleeping between us. She sighed. You're not invited. Silence, in the air, on the line, in my chest. What? It's just for close family, dear. Her voice didn't even blink. It's going to be intimate. I blinked instead. Jessica was my sister. I was her only sibling. And just like that, I was trimmed out of the picture like an unwanted shadow. I'm family I managed. We've decided, she said. That's all. No argument, no apology. Just that one word, ironed and flat decided. She hung up before I could remember how to breathe. I stood in my kitchen kettle, still whistling the cord of the receiver wrapped around my fingers like a leash. That was the moment. Not when Jessica picked a dress, not when they chose the venue. But right then at 7:04 on a gray Tuesday in February when my own mother said, "It's just family, dear." I didn't sit down right away. After the call ended, I just stood there in the kitchen staring at the wall where I used to hang the family calendar back when I still remembered birthdays without reminders. The kettle screamed behind me. I turned it off, poured the coffee, and let it go cold on the counter while the silence stretched out like a hallway I didn't want to walk down. There was a blinking red light on my answering machine. Yes, I still have one. It's older than my car and louder than it needs to be. I didn't press play. I knew what it would say, or what it wouldn't. I carried the coffee into the living room and sat down on the edge of the couch like I was afraid to crease it. On the wall across from me, there were 3 old wedding photos in mismatched frames. One of them was my parents, Linda and Robert, married in '81, all shoulder pads and stiff smiles. The second was a cousin in Texas I haven't spoken to since AOL was a thing. The third frame was empty. I bought it a few years ago thinking maybe it would hold a picture of Jessica's wedding, or maybe mine. But I guess it's just a decoration now. My sister Jessica Grant is 5 years younger. brighter, louder, always walking a step ahead and making it look like she was leading. When we were kids, she got away with everything because she knew how to turn tears on like a faucet. When we got older, she didn't need to cry, people just gave her what she wanted. At holidays, I was the one basting the turkey while she made a show of arriving late with wine she didn't pay for. When our dad turned 60, I planned the whole surprise party. She gave him a mug that said #1 Dad and got a standing ovation. I got to take out the trash. But I never really thought it meant anything until that morning, until my own mother used the word family and left me outside it. I tried to replay the call to find a gap where misunderstanding might live. But no, her tone had been too precise. I hadn't misheard it. I'd been disinvited from something I was never invited to. Jessica didn't even text me directly. She sent a group message to the family thread we call Grant Central. I named it back when we still shared memes and prayer requests. Her message read, "Hey everyone, just confirming the guest list is super tight, no extras this round. Hope you understand. Can't wait to celebrate." My name wasn't in it. Not a mention, not even an emoji. And just like that, I was edited out. A ghost with a last name. I stared at that message until my phone dimmed. The apartment felt smaller. My breath louder. The radiator kicked on with a groan like even it was annoyed. I thought about calling her, or replying with a joke to test if anyone would notice. But nothing felt sharp enough to cut through what had already been done. Instead, I opened my laptop, searched one-way flights from Chicago, paused, then typed again slower this time. Flights to somewhere no one knows me. I booked the ticket that same night. One way, midweek, Portland. A place I'd never been, but the name felt soft somehow, green and wet. A city without a history of me. The airline let me use my old miles. Miles I'd saved for something like a honeymoon I never took. I didn't even check the weather. I just packed 2 sweaters, a scarf, and the boots I wore to shovel snow out back of my building. I tossed in my sketchbook. Left the wedding frame turned face down. At O'Hare, I kept to myself. I watched a couple my parents' age argue over a boarding pass, then link arms like nothing happened. A young man FaceTimed someone named Nana and promised to bring saltwater taffy. I felt invisible, and it was a relief. The plane was delayed. I didn't care. I wasn't rushing toward anything, just away. When we finally took off, the clouds swallowed Chicago without fanfare. I looked out at the wing and wondered if this was what people meant by letting go. Not some big moment with tears and closure, but just going. I landed to drizzle and dusk. Portland air had a weight to it, clean, but heavy, like the city expected you to unpack your stories whether you liked it or not. I stayed in a tiny guest house above a bookstore called Dog-Eared Pages. The innkeeper was an older woman named Ruth who smelled like peppermint and paperbacks. She handed me the key and said, "Room 3 sticks when it's cold. You just gotta lean into it." That first night, I sat on the bed with my boots still on window open, just a crack. I could hear rain tapping the roof like it was checking in. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't scroll. I just sat there and listened. Around 1:00 a.m., I wrote a single sentence in my sketchbook, "I belonged nowhere today," and it didn't kill me. The next morning, I walked without a plan. Through wet sidewalks past chalkboard cafe signs and moss-covered fences. I bought a tea I couldn't pronounce and sipped it under an awning while people biked by like it was summer. That's when I saw her. She was crouched beside a patch of stubborn little flowers growing out of a drain crack, camera in hand, hair curled beneath a mustard-colored knit hat. She looked my age, maybe younger, but carried herself like someone who wasn't afraid to kneel in the mud. She looked up, grinned. "They bloom late here." I nodded. I didn't think anything bloomed this time of year. She stood, brushed her hands on her jeans. "They do. Quietly. You just have to be paying attention." Her name was Clara. She took photos, arranged flowers for a living, and wrote poetry she never showed anyone. We walked a while, 2 strangers both pretending we didn't have somewhere else we were supposed to be. She didn't ask why I was in Portland. I didn't offer. At the end of the trail, she stopped. "There's a dinner tonight. Nothing fancy. Just some of us who overcook and talk too much. You should come." I hesitated. The voice in my head, the one that wore my mother's tone, said, "Don't impose. You don't belong." But another voice softer and finally mine whispered, "Say yes." Clara scribbled her address on a napkin. "Bring wine if you want, or just yourself." That evening, I stood outside a little blue house with wind chimes made of old silverware. I almost turned back, but then Clara opened the door and waved me in like we were childhood friends. Inside, the house glowed. Mismatched chairs, pasta bubbling on the stove, music too loud, laughter too loud, everything too much and perfect. Someone handed me a glass of red wine. Someone else passed me a plate like it was the most natural thing to make space for me. We sat in a circle that didn't seem to have edges. No one asked what I did or where I was from. Someone toasted to people who choose their own family. I smiled. It was the first time in weeks I hadn't braced for someone to say my name like an afterthought. I didn't check my phone once. I didn't check the group chat again until the third day. Not because I missed anyone, not because I wanted back in. Just curiosity, like glancing at a fire from a safe distance hand steady on the extinguisher you'll never use. The thread still called Grant Central had gone from occasional updates to a steady stream of bubbles and emojis. Wedding countdowns, champagne selfies, Jessica, my sister, still bright, still center stage twirling in a white rehearsal dress in our parents' backyard. Mom Linda posted a photo of Dad Robert testing string lights across the porch eaves. Her caption said, "Almost there, just a few final touches." I zoomed in on the background old habit. Behind them on the patio table sat a calculator, several crumpled receipts, and what looked like a scratched legal pad. The next night, she posted again a blurry shot of a dinner plate and wine glass beside a pile of notes. Budget night stretching every penny, no one responded. I didn't either. I just stared at the photo. Mom never used to joke about money. Not unless she was trying to make something sound smaller than it was. Another message followed from Dad, a picture of Jessica and her fiancé, Tyler, on the porch holding wine glasses. The caption said, "Let the good times roll." But it was the background that struck me again. Behind them, inside the open door, a whiteboard leaned against a chair. Through a quick zoom, I caught what looked like crossed-out numbers and the word deadline underlined in red. I leaned back in my chair at the guest house tea cooling beside me. Something was off. I didn't know what yet, but I could feel the edges curling in. By the fourth day, the posts picked up. Jessica was all hashtags and sparkle, but Mom's messages started showing cracks. She double-posted, replied to her own updates like she was trying to keep energy high, but no one was matching it. And then came the voicemail. Just 3 words previewed on the screen. "Emily, we need?" I didn't listen. Not yet. Instead, I walked down to the cafe near the bookstore, ordered an oat milk chai I couldn't pronounce, sat by the window and watched strangers come and go like they weren't part of a show. I thought about the group text again. How once I had picked out the banner font for Dad's retirement party invitation. How I had booked the DJ for Jessica's Sweet 16. How I had driven to the airport at 2:00 a.m. when Mom forgot which terminal Grandma was flying into. None of it came with a thank you. But I remembered it anyway. Later that evening, I joined Clara and a few others for a backyard potluck. Someone made jackfruit tacos. Someone else brought a lemon cake with too much zest. I laughed more than I meant to. Clara noticed the shift in my silence. "You've been quieter," she said, sliding a mismatched plate my way. Watching a fire from far away, I answered. She didn't push, just nodded. "Sounds like you used to live in it." That night back at the guest house, I finally checked the voicemail. It wasn't 1, it was 3, then 6, 14 missed calls, 9 new messages. The one that made my stomach flip came from Jessica Emily. "I know you're mad, but this is serious. The venue needs full payment by Friday or we lose the date. Mom says your name is the only one with a clean credit line. Just, please think about it." For me. I let the silence stretch across the room. Let the voice fade. Let the ask hang like fog in the corners. They didn't need me for family. They needed me for financing. And for once, I wasn't rushing to the rescue. I didn't respond. Not to the messages, the missed calls, the increasingly desperate voicemails. I let them pile up like snow I wasn't planning to shovel. They kept coming anyway. Mom started with sweetness. "Emily, dear, just checking in. Hope you're somewhere safe." 3 hours later, it sharpened. I know you're busy, but we really need to talk. Then came the guilt. This isn't funny. We need your help. Jessica chimed in again, her tone clipped this time. Can you be an adult for once and call us back? But it was Dad's message that landed hardest. Look, Em, the venue needs final payment by Friday. If you won't help for us, at least think about how this affects Jessica. Her fiancé's family is watching. We've already sent out the invitations. There it was. Not concern, not remorse, not even apology, just pressure wrapped in obligation. I pictured them pacing around the house back in Evanston. Mom at the dining room table with her calculator and manila folders muttering about numbers not lining up. Dad on the porch pretending everything was fine. Jessica crying in the guest room while everyone pretended not to hear. The same house where I had once hung the fairy lights for her graduation. The same porch where I watched her open gifts while I collected wrapping paper no one asked me to. Now they needed me to co-sign the loan. Apparently, I had the best credit in the family, ironic, since I was also the one they left out of the guest list. The final voicemail from Mom arrived late that night. Emily, we've always supported you when you were figuring things out. After college, that job you quit in 18. Remember, it's just a signature. Just one. You don't even have to come back. She paused. Then, the bank already flagged the application without you. That was it. That's what this whole thing had been building toward. Not an olive branch. A transaction. I sat at the tiny cafe on the corner of Hawthorne and 36th Rain, streaking down the window beside me. My phone lay screened down beside my mug. I hadn't even unlocked it that morning. Outside, 2 older women with umbrellas shuffled toward a bus stop, their steps steady in the drizzle. One of them laughed and linked arms with the other. I watched them until they disappeared. Back inside, I opened my sketchbook and turned to a clean page. At the top, I wrote things I no longer accept. I didn't write the next line right away. I waited, let it come slow, honest. Then, in plain block letters, conditional love disguised as tradition. Below that, being the emergency contact for people who forget my birthday. Silence treated as agreement. Manipulation dressed as family duty. I closed the book, let the silence settle back in like an old friend. That night, I listened to one last voicemail, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to understand how far they'd go. Dad's voice low and tired. I know you're upset about the wedding stuff. But this is your family, Emily. We need you. Jessica needs you. You're the only one who can fix this. We'll make it up to you. But right now, we need that signature. I sipped my coffee and stared out the window. The city moved around me. A kid kicked water into the gutter. A man in a suit walked his dog with a newspaper tucked under one arm. No one was waiting for me to say yes, and that for the first time felt like freedom. The announcement came quietly. No fireworks, no confrontation. Just a screenshot from Jessica's Instagram story forwarded by a cousin I hadn't heard from in 2 years. Due to unforeseen circumstances, our wedding has been postponed indefinitely. Thank you for your understanding and continued love. No comments allowed. I checked the venue's page out of curiosity. Their last post said, now booking for new fall events. Someone asked in the comments if the Grant Tyler wedding was still happening. No one replied. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Smug, maybe. But I didn't. What I felt was empty. Not sad, not happy. Just aware, like waking up and realizing the hum you lived with for years, fridge radiator some constant, was finally gone. The next message came from Mom Linda late in the evening. You've made your point. I hope it was worth it. This is on you. That one I didn't ignore. I didn't reply either, but I listened to it twice. Her voice cracked halfway through. There was no, we're sorry. Just blame handed over like a folded napkin at dinner. Quiet, measured, loaded. A few days passed. Portland kept raining. Clara and I sat through a poetry reading where the heater clicked louder than the performer. I laughed, out loud. It surprised me. Then came the knock. I'd flown back to Chicago for a week to close up my apartment tie off loose ends forward my mail. I was planning to leave again. Alaska, maybe. Or Maine. I hadn't decided. It was a Saturday morning when the buzzer rang. I looked through the peephole. There they were, Mom, Dad, Robert, and Jessica, standing in the narrow hallway of my building like they were delivering cookies instead of consequences. I opened the door, not wide, just enough to see them clearly. Jessica spoke first. Her voice was low, like it had been wrung out. "We messed up," she said. "I messed up. No makeup. No diamond ring." Her hands were shaking. Mom didn't speak. Dad cleared his throat. "We need help," he said. There it was again. I leaned against the frame. "Let them look at me." Jessica took a step forward. "Please, Emily, if you could just talk to the bank, the house our parents." I raised my hand. Gently. Not to silence, just to pause. "I'm not the person you call when things fall apart anymore," I said. "You told me I wasn't close enough. Now I finally believe you." They didn't answer right away. Jessica looked down. Mom looked past me. Dad looked tired. I picked up the small suitcase I'd packed that morning, slid my keys into my coat pocket, walked out the door. They moved aside, quiet as ghosts. The elevator was waiting. I stepped in, turned, and met their eyes one last time. "I hope you figure it out," I said. "I really do." The doors closed. It was the softest ending I'd ever given them, and the most honest. The plane lifted off just after dawn, the city shrinking beneath us like something I'd already started forgetting. Alaska wasn't the plan, but then again, nothing had been except leaving, except not staying where I wasn't wanted. From the window, the clouds looked like folded linen, the kind my mother used to keep in the hutch for good company. I thought of that as the cabin tilted gently east, and I wondered how long I'd lived trying to be good company to people who never set the table for me. Somewhere over Montana, I pulled out my journal. I flipped past the things I no longer accept list and turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote "Letter to my future self." I didn't overthink it. Just let the words fall. You didn't burn anything down. You just stopped holding the matches for people who kept asking you to light yourself on fire. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself they only respect when they're in need. You're allowed to be gone. You're allowed to be free. The flight attendant brought me black coffee in a paper cup that tasted like possibility. Outside the window, the sky shifted pale gold, edging into something brighter. A page in the in-flight magazine said there might be a chance to see the aurora tonight. I smiled. Not because I believed it, but because I liked the idea of something glowing just for me. For once, I was heading toward a storm that belonged only to me, and I wasn't afraid of the thunder. I was slicing grapes in half for Nate's lunchbox when I realized it had been exactly 8 months since the accident. Funny how small routines become lifelines you cut, you pack, you breathe. That morning, like most others lately, I stood in our narrow kitchen trying to keep the grief from seeping into everything. Nate, my 7-year-old son, was humming in the next room, bent over his book of science experiments. I could hear him sound out a word. "Combust." "Ion," he mumbled, his voice rising with pride. He had Mark's curiosity and Mark's smile. Sometimes, when I wasn't ready, it would catch me off guard like a slap. Mark died on a Tuesday. A freak collapse at the construction site. A piece of scaffolding failed. The phone call came at 10:47 a.m. I remember the time only because I had just set down my coffee to review a presentation for work. The mug stayed full all day. I couldn't drink it after. The first few months blurred. Funeral arrangements, insurance paperwork. Nate waking up at night with questions I couldn't answer. What happens when someone dies? Is Daddy cold underground? I answered the best I could, always with gentleness, and never with certainty. If it weren't for Margaret and Walter Mark's parents, I don't know how I would have held things together. They stepped in without hesitation. Every weekday at 3:00 p.m., Walter would pull up to Nate's school in his old beige Ford truck, the kind with a cassette deck that still worked. Nate always came home with new words he learned from his grandpa. Decomposition, gravity, theories. They never asked for anything in return, not once. I picked Nate up from their house every evening. Margaret always tried to hand me an envelope, just something to help, she'd say, as if I wasn't already salaried, as if the life insurance hadn't come through. The company gave us enough, I told her once, trying to smile through the guilt. Please, keep it. She met my eyes steady as always. That's not why we offer Carol. The check from the insurance had come a few weeks after the funeral, $300,000. Between that and my job in corporate marketing, Nate and I weren't struggling. But the security didn't soften the ache, and it certainly didn't change how my own family treated us. My parents, Eleanor and Frank Whitman, were polite in the way strangers are polite in elevators, always civil, never warm. My sister Susan, 3 years older, always favored, was the daughter who could do no wrong. They praised her neat home, her well-behaved kids, her calm. It didn't matter that her kids barely looked up from their phones at family dinners. To my parents, that was peace. Nate, with his questions and his wonder, was a handful. Last Sunday at their house, Eleanor had barely swallowed her sip of tea before sighing. Why does he always need to talk? Can't he just sit quietly for once? He just asked how your clock worked, I said. It's not a crime. Rachel's kids don't do that, Frank added without looking up. They know when to hush. Rachel. He meant Susan. Her real name's Susan, but Dad's always called her Rachel, his mother's name. No one ever corrected him. Not even her. I didn't say anything else. I just nodded, folded Nate's drawing into my purse, and told him it was time to go. He looked confused, like he'd done something wrong. He hadn't. The lasagna should have tipped me off. Eleanor only made it for 2 reasons: when someone was dying, or when she wanted something. That night, there was no funeral. Just an unusually warm welcome, a perfectly set table, and Frank in a sweater that didn't have a hole in it. Susan was there too, her 3 children arranged around at the table like props. They said nothing, eyes fixed on their screens, fingers tapping in unison. Nate sat beside me, still holding the paper airplane he'd made in the car. Dinner began like any other, quiet, chewing the occasional compliment about the sauce. Then Eleanor stood and placed a small cream-colored envelope next to my plate. Not slid. Placed. Deliberate, like laying a card in a game no one else realized they were playing. I was going to mail it, she said, wiping her hands on a napkin. But since you're here, I stared at the envelope. No name, no address. Just sealed clean expectant. I wrote it after church last week, she added, sitting again. It's not long. I opened it after dinner. The letter was handwritten in her looping perfect penmanship, a script I hadn't seen since she used to leave notes in my lunchbox as a kid, notes she stopped writing once Susan started getting straight A's, and I didn't. Carol, we know you've had a hard year. We've tried to be there in our way. I know we're not like Maggie and Walt. God bless them, but we care just as deeply. Maybe we show it differently. Your father and I have been struggling. Between heating bills, car repairs, and your father's back, it's been difficult. We don't want to ask you outright, but if your heart tells you to help, we would be grateful for any contribution, even $1,000 a month if it feels right. Susan's already offering $500. She's trying with everything going on. We don't want to burden you, only if it feels right. With love, Mom. I read it twice. Then again, no demand. Just a tone that clung like warm fog, impossible to grasp, harder to escape. My mother, who had barely held Nate's hand at the funeral, now invoking Maggie and Walt like saints. My father, who once called my job playing with words, suddenly burdened by repairs and back pain. And Susan, of course, Susan already doing her part. I got one too, Susan said later in the kitchen, rinsing a glass. Her voice casual. I told them I'd do 500. I mean, with the kids and all, it's tight. But it's family, right? She didn't look at me, just smiled into the sink. I said I'd think about it. And I did. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after Nate had gone to bed. The envelope lay open, the letter smoothed out beside my half-drunk tea. I thought about Mark, about what he would have said. They don't get to name your heart, Carol, I could almost hear him say. Only you do. But I also thought of being the daughter who didn't try, of being judged for not stepping up again, of Eleanor's tight-lipped silence, of Susan's sideways glances. And so 2 days later, I initiated the transfer. $1,000. No questions, no conditions. The first transfer left my account on a Wednesday morning, just after I dropped Nate off at school. I remember the sound of the confirmation ping, clean, impersonal. $1,000 gone in the time it took for the app to refresh. I told myself it was nothing, that it was worth it. If giving meant being seen, if it meant my parents would treat Nate like part of the family, not an interruption, then it was worth every penny. At least that's what I believed that first month. The next time I called Eleanor, it was to ask for help with pickup. Maggie had a doctor's appointment, and I had a late call with a client in Boston. Nate needed someone to get him from school at 3. There was a pause on the line, just long enough for my stomach to tighten. "Oh, honey," she said, voice lined with apology. "I'd love to, really, but I've had this migraine all day." You know how they get. I told her it was fine. The month after that, the excuse was her back. Then it was Frank's physical therapy appointment. Then groceries. Then simply, "We're not up for it today." But the money that kept moving. Like clockwork. Each month I sent it on time without question. And each time I wondered if this was the month something might shift. A call, a visit, a thank you. None came. Meanwhile, Maggie and Walt remained steady. They never brought up money, never once made me feel like I owed them anything. If I called, they answered. If I needed help, they came. One Thursday in the rain, I stood outside Nate's school holding my phone with shaking fingers. Eleanor had just told me she might be coming down with something. "I'm sorry, Carol, I just wouldn't want to risk giving him anything." I called Walt. "We're already halfway there," he said. "Nate's telling us all about volcanoes today." I leaned against my car, rain tapping the hood, and let the tears come. I was giving so much to my parents and getting nothing in return, not even the dignity of honesty. The envelope was thicker than usual, cream-colored with gold trim and a wax seal on the back. It arrived 1 week before Christmas. Nate had been at the table gluing buttons onto construction paper trees for Maggie's mantel. I slipped the envelope into my pocket, smiling at him. I waited until he went to bed before I opened it. Inside was a printed invitation. Eleanor's touch unmistakable. Scripted font poinsettia border and a note at the bottom. "Please join us for a special holiday evening, honoring the grandchildren who bring grace and harmony to our gatherings. Formal attire appreciated. Kindly only bring children who understand respect, stillness, and good manners." I read it twice. The message wasn't loud, but it was clear. This year's Christmas Eve celebration wouldn't be adults only. It would be selectively child-friendly. And my child, my Nate, didn't meet the standard. I could already hear Eleanor's voice if I questioned it. "It's not about Nate specifically. We're just trying something more refined this year. Don't take it so personally, Carol." But I did. Of course I did. Nate had done nothing but ask questions and show interest. He was never cruel, never unkind. He wanted to learn to connect. But in Eleanor's world, curiosity was disruptive. Quiet compliance was love. For 3 nights, I didn't respond to the invitation. I thought about skipping it entirely, staying home with Maggie and Walt drinking cocoa and watching Nate place the star on their tree. But part of me still clung to the thread, the one that had always been there, frayed but unbroken, the part that wanted to be included, that hoped maybe this time it would feel different. Maybe this time they'd see him. So I came up with a compromise. I would bring a gift, stay an hour, just enough for appearances. Nate would stay with Maggie and Walt somewhere warm, somewhere wanted. I told myself it was the mature thing to do. I told myself it wouldn't matter. But as I laid out his dress shirt on the bed, then folded it and tucked it back into the drawer, I felt something small and sharp settle in my chest, like a splinter that wouldn't surface. Christmas Eve came cold and clear, the kind of night where the stars looked sharpened by ice. Nate wore his navy blazer, the one he picked out himself last fall, and clutched a wrapped box with both hands. Inside was a snow globe we'd made together. He insisted it was just right for Grandma. We parked at the curb in front of my parents' house. The windows glowed with gold light. Laughter filtered through the glass, muffled but bright. Nate turned to me from the back seat. "Should I carry it with both hands so it doesn't shake?" he asked, eyes serious. "You're perfect," I said. "Let's go." He skipped ahead up the walk, coat-flapping box cradled in his arms. I followed with a smaller bag, just a few gifts for the cousins. Eleanor opened the door. Her expression shifted the moment she saw him. She glanced behind her, then stepped out, pulling the door halfway shut behind her. "Carol," she said, her voice pitched low. "I thought we were clear about the invitation." I blinked. What? The note, she said, lips pursed. This evening is, well, it's for children who understand how to behave in formal gatherings. Nate stood beside me, still holding the box. I looked down at him, then back at her. He's 7, I said. Not a parade float. I'm not trying to be difficult, she said, glancing toward the laughter inside. But the tone we're setting tonight is elegant. You understand? I don't, I said. Not even a little. Behind her, I could see coats piled on the entry bench, tiny shoes, wrapping paper scattered in the hall. Rachel's kids are here, I said. She didn't flinch. They're different, she said, eyes not quite meeting mine. They know how to be still, respectful. Nate shifted beside me. He wasn't crying, but he was quiet. He looked at me, waiting. I took the box gently from his hands. Why don't you go wait in the car, sweetheart, I said. I'll just be a minute. He nodded and walked back down the path steps, slower now. The porch light cast his shadow long and narrow across the snow. I turned back to Eleanor. You could have just said he wasn't welcome, I said. She crossed her arms. Don't make a scene, Carol. I looked past her into the house, to the people gathered with cider and music, to the other children laughing, running full of noise and joy. None of them were still. None of them were quiet. Just Nate. And his snow globe. I handed her the gift bag. Don't worry, I said. There won't be a scene. Then I walked inside alone. The warmth inside hit me like steam from an open oven. Frank was pouring eggnog into heavy glass mugs, and Susan's voice carried over the hum of Christmas music, smooth and practiced. The living room was full, cousins, aunts, kids darting between wrapping paper piles. Someone had strung real pine garland along the banister. It looked like a holiday card. No one noticed I had come alone, at least not right away. I stood just inside the doorway holding the gift bag, watching a toddler in red pajamas toddle past a glittery bough stuck to his back. Then I heard it. Is this one from Aunt Carol's money too? A girl's voice, small, curious. One of Susan's daughters unwrapping a toy horse with golden hooves. Susan didn't answer, but her shoulders tightened. I stepped forward. Excuse me, I said loud enough to quiet the music, soft enough to remain steady. Heads turned. I know some of you have been asking where Nate is. Aunt Caroline looked up from the couch, blinking. Is he sick? No, I said. He's outside, in the car, because I was told he wasn't the right kind of child for this party. A hush settled. He wasn't welcome. I continued, because he asks too many questions, because he's curious, because he doesn't sit still and stare at a screen. Meanwhile, I was good enough to send money every month, money I thought was helping family. Turns out it was helping decorate this house, fill this tree, fund this party. Susan stood pale. Carol, let's talk about this somewhere else. No, I said. Here is fine. I turned to my father, who had set down his mug. Did you know she never sent her share? I asked. Not $1. David, Susan's husband, stiffened beside her. What? Susan flinched. It was supposed to be symbolic. You know we're tight with the kids and all. It was just to show Carol she wasn't alone. You lied, David said flatly. To me, to her. Eleanor stepped forward, her smile brittle. This isn't necessary. Let's enjoy the evening. No, I said again. Let's tell the truth. You didn't just exclude my son. You used me. You sold your approval and called it family. Aunt Caroline stood. Is that true? No one answered. Uncle Mike grabbed his coat. Come on, Jan, let's go. More rustling, more movement. People beginning to leave quietly, or not. I watched Susan try to stop David. Watched my father sit down like someone had taken the air from the room. Watched Eleanor stand there, still holding her glass, still pretending it was all some misunderstanding. I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. I set the gift bag down on the table by the tree. For what it's worth, I said Nate made Grandma a snow globe. Then I turned and walked out. New Year's Day was gray and still. Nate was asleep on the couch, buried under a fleece blanket, a half-eaten cinnamon roll balanced on a napkin beside him. The doorbell rang just after 10. Through the peephole, I saw them, Eleanor and Frank, standing on the porch in matching wool coats, holding a large wrapped package between them. The kind of gift that screamed price tag. Too new, too late. I opened the door but didn't move aside. Carol Eleanor said, her voice soft, too soft. "We just want to talk." Frank shifted the box in his hands. "It's for Nate." We picked it out together. I didn't touch it. "I don't think he needs it," I said. "We made a mistake," she said quickly. "We see that now." Frank added, "This isn't about the money. We were wrong to treat you and Nate the way we did." I looked at them, really looked. They weren't sorry. They were cornered. "Are you apologizing," I asked, "because you know what you did was wrong, or because now everyone else knows?" Eleanor's eyes dropped. Frank didn't answer. "I think you should go," I said. "I don't believe you, and I don't trust you. Not anymore." She stepped forward just an inch. "Carol, we're family." "No," I said. "You made that choice when you told my son he didn't belong." They stood there a moment longer, then turned still, holding the unopened gift, walking slowly back to their car. I shut the door, and this time it stayed shut. Winter melted into spring. I never restarted the bank transfers. I never returned the calls. The unopened gift stayed in the hall closet for weeks before I finally donated it. Instead, the money went into Nate's college fund, just like Mark and I had planned. Sundays became dinners at Aunt Caroline's, where Nate sat at the adults' table and no one told him to be quiet. He helped Walt fix the gate in the backyard. Maggie taught him how to make her cornbread. When he asked questions, people leaned in, not away. That summer at a neighborhood barbecue, Nate asked why Uncle Mike's pool had a funny smell. "Chlorine," Mike said, crouching down beside him. "Want to know how it works?" I watched them talk, heads bent, hands, gesturing, voices bright. No eye rolls, no sighs. Just welcome. Later that night, Nate curled up beside me, sun-warmed and full. "Do you think Grandma Maggie would want a snow globe next year?" he asked sleepily. I smiled into his hair. "I think she'd love that." I once stood at that door, gift in hand, child beside me, knowing no one inside was waiting for us. Not because he did anything wrong, but because adults needed a reason to hide the truth. If you've ever been the one left out, even when you brought your whole heart with you, you understand. You don't have to explain. Just leave a single dot for the child in you who was once turned away. You don't need to say more. Just drop a dot if you know the feeling.